Everybody does a late night show differently. The late night show is all about who's the host. It's an extension of their personality. And everybody does it differently. And so I look at the other late night shows, and on the surface there'll be similarities. There's the desk, and there's the band, and you tell some jokes. But after that, I think the shows are different and should be different because the people hosting them are very different people. So for me personally, I don't like pointed comedy. I'm less interested in making an insightful satirical comment that rattles the White House or unhinges the power elite. That's not really what got me into comedy. I like silliness. I like things that make me laugh. I like things that make me laugh really hard without thinking about them too much. And I think that can be the smartest comedy. I think it's the hardest comedy to come up with sometimes, is just something that's visual or silly or fun, and it makes people laugh, and it endures. And so my favorite monologue jokes, if I told them to you, if I could even remember them, would not be ones where I skewered the president or skewered an administration's policy. They would be very silly jokes about a man in Scranton who got his testicle caught in a combine. And I know the man, he's fine. But that's the kind of stuff that just always appealed to me. And so, and all the things I've worked on in my career, like The Simpsons, I've always been drawn to the silliness, the cartoonish silliness of, physical comedy. That's the stuff I always loved. So that's my approach. That's what I like to infuse my show with. And I really respect these other shows. I think they're fantastic, but I know that it would if I had to host someone else's show and do it their way, I'd be miserable and I'd quit after a day. I like funny, and that sounds like on a special that I'm guessing is this sophisticated. That sounds like a stupid thing to say, but I relentlessly resist the conscious attempt to be too cerebral. And one of the reasons I love about the Marx Brothers, I was watching, I think it was 2 nights ago, I watched Night at the Opera again. And there's no reason for it. It's just funny. I mean, they're in Italy, and then they're on a ship, and they're messing around the ship, and Harpo's jumping out a porthole, and then they're in New York, and someone's trying to arrest them, and they're running around room to room, and then suddenly they're in the opera house, and there's just a frenetic silliness to it that to me is life-affirming. And that's the stuff that I love. And one of my favorite quotes is from Groucho Marx. Years after he made Duck Soup, some intellectual writer was interviewing him and said, "Now, Groucho, it's so fascinating. Duck Soup was clearly the Marx Brothers responding to the rise of fascism in Italy and Germany, and this was your comedic attack on that, horrible movement." And Groucho took the cigar out of his mouth and said, "What are you talking about? We were 4 Jews trying to get a laugh." And it just rang so true to me. Great. Did it help people find fascism ridiculous? Maybe. Did it in any way help? Who can say? I think, bullets were better than a movie, but it was just funny. It was just funny, and and they were being silly, and that's what I like. W.C. Fields, playing ping pong at the society party. Three Stooges. There's some great stuff that the Three Stooges do. When snobbery starts to creep into comedy, I get very suspicious. And the Marx Brothers, there's the randomness and silliness of it. Why any of that? Why a guy with a piece of tape for a mustache, bent over, and accompanied by a guy with a top hat and a horn at the end of his cane, and an Italian guy who plays the piano? Like, why? Why any of it? And that's what's beautiful about it. You know what's the beauty of comedy? It's Darwinian. The good idea, in a good comedy system, and Saturday Night Live is clearly it's a good system. It's flawed. My system's flawed now on late night. They're all flawed in their own way. Good ideas just present themselves like a peacock. You can't deny it. You can't keep a good idea down. And So when there's a funny idea that's going to work and make the show a little better, it's going to get on Late Night with Conan O'Brien. It's going to get on Saturday Night Live. Every now and then there'll be people that bitch about, well, my idea really would have been great, but they kept me down. I doubt it. Everybody wants, if an idea is really funny, it's like finding a diamond in the dirt. You're not going to toss it away. It's going to get on. My favorite thing that Andy Kaufman did was his whole scam with wrestling. I mean, to me, that was the funniest thing that Andy Kaufman did. And there was I think a documentary I saw a number of years ago, which might be one of my favorite things ever, which was Andy Kaufman on wrestling, and it was just a documentary about his whole, journey wrestling women and threatening to wrestle, was it Jerry Lawler? And what I love so much about it is it's not for anyone. It's so clearly just for him. Who's the audience for that? Do you know what I mean? Everyone who came to see those wrestling matches just hated him. Most people who saw his appearances on Letterman thought it was real and something was wrong with him. Who was that for? He just had the strength of his conviction. He an incredible waste of everyone's time. And that was part of what I think made it so funny, and all those things that he was doing, he had a religious conviction in it. And I think that's so much of what makes it powerful and makes it funny. You don't get the impression he was worried, how's this whole wrestling thing going over? Well, what are you talking about? What's the point of it? What's the point of any of it? I mean, that, to me, what's most fantastic about it is that there's a lot of it that just seems pointless. And that's, that speaks to me in some way. Some of my favorite things that we've ever done here, there's no point to it, These images come up in my head, and I'm like, why did we do that? I don't know. It really made me laugh. It was pointless. So, yeah, I think I don't know who he was doing all that for. He was, primarily himself, and that's what most of the great artists are doing. I don't think all comedians are necessarily oddballs. I mean, because there are clearly people that you like and admire that are comedians. I mean, Johnny Carson comes to mind. Johnny Carson was not some outside weirdo struggling to get in and comment on what's happening. He was someone with just a very good sense of humor who was inordinately charming. You know what I mean? And so I don't want to characterize all comedians as being outsiders or loners or weirdos. I'm fun at a party, but definitely I think a lot of the root of comedy is maybe coming from a place of being excluded or outside. I mean, many people have made the point that who's funny? Jewish people are funny, Irish people are funny. They're groups that were excluded or left out, or they were sublimated. They had no power. This is a way to worm your way back into the system. Well, comedy is a defense mechanism, and basically, I remember saying to my father once that I'm earning a living exploiting something that should probably be treated, and I think that's true. I really do think that you work with what you've got, and people instinctively know what they're not good at and what they're good at a very early age. And I maintain that at the age of 4 or 5, non-athletes know they're not athletes. And they know, okay, that's not going to work. And I'm not the best looking guy in the world. And I don't have this, I don't have that. But if you have an ability to make people laugh, you find out early. And probably everyone you're talking to has said, yeah, I started making people laugh at the family dinner table, in the playground at school. You figure that out, you start using that to get by, and then you hyper-develop it, and then you overdevelop it, and then you're not fit for anything else, and then you're a comedian who's miserable on the weekends. And I really believe that's how it works. It sounds crazy because And I'll say this, I'll tell you guys this. I actually hate jokes. I tell jokes at the top of my show, but only so that I can then play with the audience's reaction to them. I can never remember jokes. And jokes to me are too obvious. Like they're too, I'm going to tell you something and then you're going to laugh. Well, that's completely contrary to my nature. My nature is I want to make you laugh, but I don't want to tell you I'm going to make you laugh. Do you know what I mean? It's too, so as a consequence, I've had people come up to me and they say, oh, tell us a joke. I don't know any jokes. But if you put me in a situation where for an hour I have to entertain you, I'll make you laugh. I don't know what's going to happen, and it might get pretty ugly. But I certainly don't have a joke memorized. I admire, when I first got out to Los Angeles, I went to an event and Milton Berle was the MC. And this is probably when he was probably 78 at the time. Hilarious. Jokes. Fantastic jokes. Rattling them off one after the other. They were all in his head. He had hundreds of thousands of jokes, and they were great. And he was fantastic. And I looked at him, and I remember thinking, I'm not one of those guys. I think I can make people laugh out of a nervous desperation, bred from self-hate, which is the parental fault. But just had to sneak that in. They won't watch. But those guys that know all those jokes, I admire it. I don't have that kind of brain. Can't remember them. They're like math tables to me. I still don't know what 8 times 8 is. One of the things that's great about Buster Keaton is that he was relentlessly sad, and I've noticed that really works well for me if you have a certain kind of face. I think some of the biggest laughs I've had on this show are I'm not saying a word, I'm just looking sad. So, do you know what I mean? We'll have a beautiful actress on the show, and she'll say, "If I had known you a few years before you got married, Conan, I'd have taken you to bed." And then just the director cuts to me, and there's a deep sadness. I don't say a word, and the crowd really likes it. They like when I'm defeated. I don't know why, but I know that at an early age, that when I look sad in a certain kind of situation, people really enjoy it. It's also Jack Benny, that wistful sadness, and Buster Keaton had that, which is most miserable looking person you've ever seen in comedy, and it's sort of relentlessly funny. Yeah, we've done 2,624 hours of late night here at the Conan O'Brien Fiasco. And so it's impossible for me to isolate, any one thing we did. I mean, one of my favorite things is when I somehow got involved in the presidential elections in Finland, and it just kept escalating and escalating and escalating, and we kept doing more and more things on our show that were then shown in Finland, and then the New York Times picked up on it. It all culminated with me announcing that I was going to Finland, and I went to Finland, and thousands of people at the airport, screaming mobs, pursued by the media in Finland all over the place. And then finally it culminated in meeting the president of Finland at the palace, people lined up around the gates, chanting my name. I met with her, and then I walked out, and these guards opened a door, and I walked out on the steps, and the crowds were cheering. And I remember standing there and thinking, I did it. It was a real we've done it moment. I've met with the president. It's all culminated. I've walked out. The crowds are cheering. And it was that, did what? What was the point of all this? It was a completely silly, it was harmless, but it was everything that I love about comedy. It was an idiot in over his head, fish out of water. I had no business being there. Famous in that country for no reason. And meeting with a head of state and being presented with a plaque, and then walking out onto a balcony and being cheered by a mob for no reason. It was every, classic comedy I've ever loved. It was just the randomness of it and the absurdity of it all. And it was just, to me, that warms my heart, that in a world, the world that we have today that can seem so serious, something so pointless and silly, and I think good natured could just happen for no reason. And, so those are the moments on my show that I always love, that just, and that I remember. Do you know what I mean? Those are the moments that resonate with me, and those are the moments that I think when I'm 90, if I'm still alive, I'll be sitting on a porch somewhere in Maine. No one will know who I am, and I'll be wearing a wife beater T-shirt and drinking whatever juice keeps me alive till 90. And I'll be thinking that'll be the stuff I'll be reflecting on.